Hello, beloveds. Hello, beloveds. What are you transmitting? That's a key focus at the moment because we're in this large, long-term process of endings and beginnings. I would say when does that begin? When does that end? It's ongoing, but certainly in terms of the planetary energies from last year to the middle of next year is a key process of endings and beginnings, and I'm sure many of us can see that in our lives. And within that we have the smaller cycles and the longer cycles. Next year some of the longer cycles are coming to fruition. More about that later. But this year, just this weekend, we've had a sea change in that the planet Jupiter, which spends a year in one sign, has moved into the sign of Gemini. So very different from Taurus, where Jupiter has been for the last year. So the sign of Gemini, air sign, the first air sign. And if you think about air, it's always on the move. It's invisible, and yet we're aware of its effects. Yeah, so oxygen, the breath, wind, the wind in nature. And yesterday I was not really reflecting about this Facebook live. Actually, it was before I realised I was going to share a live. Was recognising the shift into Gemini is that what is being transmitted through frequency, through the air. What is tangible? What are we transmitting? What are we receiving? And I got this image of a lush flower meadow this time of year, May in Europe, in the Northern Hemisphere, full, so full and abundant. And we could say that symbolises Jupiter's passage through Taurus the last year, yeah. Deeply rooted, for that abundance to be manifest, it needs to be deeply rooted, Taurus, fixed earth. And then Jupiter moves into the next sign, Gemini, which is very different. And what I saw in this image was insects flying through the air, moving from one plant to another, one tree to another, one flower to another, changing things, making a difference. And the symbol for me for Gemini is the butterfly. And the butterfly moves with the air. It's light, it's free, it's, one could say, playful, which is a quality of the sign of Gemini. And yet the butterfly also goes through various phases of development and evolution, from the egg through the caterpillar, through the pupa, into becoming a butterfly, much as ourselves. And when it lays an egg on a leaf, it simply does that one act, yeah? It lays an egg and then it flies off and it's on to the next leaf, or it lays eggs. Those eggs are then left to develop in their own time, in their own way. And that's very much a Gemini quality, in that we make connections. We might have a thought, an idea, a connection, yeah? We might move with that, we might not, yeah? It depends on our motivation. We connect with someone, we have a conversation, or we pass them a piece of information that moves them on or changes them, or it changes us as the result of the conversation. Then we move on to something else. So Gemini is very connected to that sense of freedom, movement, and a catalyst. Small connections that create change. The danger with Gemini, though, because it's the sign of information, it's the sign of the mind, and as we're aware, the mind can move through many different realms. The planet Mercury, connected with Gemini, the ruler of Gemini, was the only deity able to move in all the realms, the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. So you can see how mind, the movement of mind, can influence our direction and our creativity. Gemini is a sign that can get easily distracted, can get scattered, can get caught up in the next sweetie on the sweet shop shelf, yeah? And then doesn't allow the process of real connection or manifestation to anchor, yeah? So that's the shadow of Gemini. With Jupiter in Gemini for the next year, then the danger or the risk of us getting too scattered, too unfocused, too distracted is strong. Yeah? This week sets the scene for the foundation for how we're going to express and experience Jupiter in Gemini for all of us. Now, I've used the analogy of the butterfly as an insect, and when I was reflecting on this, what I was seeing, this image that I was being gifted, was I saw the bees. And I saw the bees, how the bees move from one flower to another, collecting pollen, and in that they fertilize the flowers. Yeah, so there's a dual purpose. They're collecting the pollen, they take it back to the hive, they're fertilizing the flowers. Other insects do that too, but the bee is a really good analogy because the bee goes back to the hive, it takes the pollen from which they create honey and they feed the larva, and the bee has a instinctual knowing of its role within the hive. Yeah. So Jupiter is a social planet. It's part of our understanding of who I am in this larger sphere of my social community, in the collective, and what I'm here for, what my purpose is, what my role is, what I'm growing towards. So Jupiter in Gemini is very much, the analogy is very much like the bee, collecting the pollen, fertilizing the flowers, taking it back to the hive and creating something with it. Yeah, rather than getting caught up in the wonder and the beauty and the temptation of the constant distraction of moving on and not really allowing anything to land. So that's a good image for Jupiter in Gemini. When you go about your networking or within your friendships or your conversations or even in the movement of your mind, what is being fertilized and what is it contributing to? Is it contributing to your larger focus or your larger vision or your deep values? That's a key question. Now, as Jupiter enters Gemini, this week it's moving towards an exact trine with Pluto, and it's also sitting with the mother of the sea dwarf planet, Sedna. Now, Sedna stays in a sign for 40 years, and she's just moved into Gemini. So we could say this is a fertilization of her qualities that's being anchored both in the deep of us and in our higher frequency. So let me kind of flesh that out for you. So these energies, Jupiter with Pluto with Sedna, can be a positive flow. So Sedna was or represents in her mythology, and if you want to know more about that, there's more in my book, Her Sacred Fire, because I don't have time, and this is not the right place to go deeply into that. So Sedna, known as Mother of the Sea, so not a goddess, but nonetheless sacred to the Inuit people. And what she holds for them is the knowing that we are one with nature. Yeah, so we're not above nature, we are an aspect of nature. And Sedna's mythology relates to betrayal by the father, by the masculine. Yeah, and that can be the masculine within us, so our strength and our presence, and that really holds us when the chips are down, so to speak. Yeah, our connectivity to this is what I stand for, this is what I'm here for, this is my deep presence, our knowing. And also the the connection to the father figure externally, so that can be literally father figure, it can be authority figure, it can be the system, yeah. So the rules and boundaries and so on that are set by the system, especially with Jupiter being a social planet, you know, we live within this framework of a particular culture and a cultural set of rules and laws. So Jupiter being conjunct Sedna, so that means they're sitting together. And although this is exact now, it moves through for the next couple of weeks. So it's really kind of a key focus. We're drawn into the depths of the ocean, and the ocean representing the psyche, and exploring, as Sedna had to because of the betrayal, what is my next incarnation? Yeah. So not in terms of another lifetime, but in terms of now. Sedna was forced to evolve through sacrifice, through her mythology, and that was through the betrayal of the masculine. So what is it you're called to evolve into that involves you stepping into the deeper ocean of who you are, and any betrayal, trauma, issues with the masculine, issues with the father, also your own inner patriarch. So how does your inner patriarch betray your feminine? Yeah. So we're called to both a deeper strength of feminine when the shit hits the fan, so to speak, but also to the presence of strength of the masculine to hold that when we're in those deep dark waters. Yeah. And Jupiter conjunct Sedna will enable us to connect with, because remember Gemini is a connective sign, what's in the deep that I need to get a handle on, get anchored in, communicate in a new way. Now that new way is held by Pluto in Aquarius. So Jupiter, as it moves into Gemini, is in a trine, so that's a positive flow of energy with Pluto in Aquarius. So as many of you who follow astrology will know, Pluto's in this kind of ending and beginning point now where it's moving backwards and forwards between Capricorn, the deconstruction of our traditional systems that no longer serve, and Aquarius, the revitalizing of that energy, the reinventing of that energy into new forms, higher frequency forms that serve our lives, yeah, that serve our individuality and the collective. So this trine to Pluto and Aquarius calls us to know what is calling you, yeah, what is calling you in that sense of your individuality and what you're here for, what you're here to transmit to the collective. And if we look at Sedna and we look at Pluto, they both are underworld characters. And the underworld is where the fertility, the deep feminine, lies that enables us to be able to transmit in a new way. Now, when I use that word transmit, what do I mean? Well, Gemini is the sign of the mind, yeah? So we can transmit through our thought fields, yeah? We can transmit to others, and I'm sure we're all aware of that, the kind of synchronicities, or you pick up on someone who's been thinking about you, or the phone rings and you've just been thinking about that person. And so like the mobile phone signals and satellite signals and the whole field of different frequency that we're involved in, yeah, this is Jupiter and Gemini. Yeah, what we're picking up on in the ether, what we're picking up on in the non-physical, yeah, and how that influences who we are and what we're creating. So we've got this higher frequency calling of Pluto in Aquarius. We've got Jupiter in Gemini saying, what are you transmitting? So we're talking about thoughts, but with the connection to Sedna, we're also talking about the deep emotional world, the psyche, because that's what the ocean represents. It's like what's in your psyche, what's in your journey of learning from your feminine energy, that's here to be transmitted in a new way. So Jupiter and Gemini, writing, teaching, learning, conversations, networking, exactly what I'm doing here, Facebook Live. We transmit in so many different ways. Now, it's interesting that yesterday I also had an insight about the Jupiter in Gemini nature. So I've used the bee to describe that, but also the butterfly. So being aware of how we plant seeds or how we're fertilizing things, but then move on. That's the Gemini nature. It's kind of knowing that, like the butterfly laying the egg on the leaf or eggs on the leaf, that changes everything, yeah? But it doesn't change it immediately. So yesterday I had an email from somebody I met probably about 9 years ago at the Sun and Moon Festival. And at the time we had a really strong connection and we were going to get together to do something, and it just fell away at that time. And I'd not really thought about this woman till I received the email last night. And that email showed me that the connection I made then, 9-10 years ago, the connection that we made together seeded something that is now starting to move into its next phase now, 9-10 years later. I can't remember the exact time frame. So Jupiter and Gemini kind of calls us to that seeding process, to following what we're receiving in terms of signals, and knowing when we need to stay with something or when we just need to let something fall away or leave it alone, and to allow it to have its own life process. Because we never know, you know, we might think we know, or we might be called to bring something to fruition, but having awareness of life's own growth processes, and when we're getting too forceful because of our own agendas in what we're transmitting, and when we know we need to be more hands-off, is really key at this time. So I hope that's been supportive to you in terms of this new 1-year passage of Jupiter in Gemini. Certainly in lots of ways the energy will feel much lighter, but then we have the risk of kind of going too far out as an escape from the deeper layers. The key is to keep ourselves rooted in the deep while also following the threads of what's appearing moment to moment. So thank you for watching and listening, and I wish you well in this new sea change that we're in.